Joining me now is the president of our local transit union, Scott Szabadka. We're going to be talking a little bit about the state of transit and as well as transit unions' wish to see over $5 billion in investment in transit in Canada. So welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, so a press release came out last week, Scott, basically framing that, with COVID-19 crisis, transit operations throughout Canada are going to be seeing an impact and have been seeing an impact, and they're requesting a rather large sum of money to help with that. So we'll start with that and talk to me a little bit about that request.
So between all the locals, the many locals that we have in Canada, it's a primarily Canada thing. Our union is an international union, both Canada, US. So here in Canada, we're trying to ask the federal government for a $5 billion investment to help offset operational costs with transit agencies across Canada. The biggest idea right now is operation. We do get a lot of capital project money from the government, but due to COVID and everything else, a lot of agencies had to lay off, reduce service, no collecting fares, things like that. So there's a lot of agencies that are not running. There's I think there's 2,000 layoffs right now across the ATU here in Canada. And then there's multiple services that have been reduced in hours of operation or reduced in services to help offset the cost. Our biggest worry right now is if there is a second wave or if something else was to happen across Canada, we don't want the agencies to suffer. We want them to be able to turn around and say, oh, we received money from the federal government or the province. We're targeting both of them. I know the press release said federal, but we're also going towards the provincial government side to ask for funding as well, because people need to be moved around. We need to move people to appointments and everything else. So the $5 billion would be an ask for across Canada, obviously divided between 35 multiple like ATU locals and other unions that operate transit like QP and Unifor, et cetera.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about just the people need to move, right? And people maybe take for granted just how much of a necessary service that transit is. And despite these unique times, we know that, especially here in Cornwall, our buses were running. But as you mentioned, there was a lot of changes that had to be made, such as not collecting fares. So maybe talk to me about the local impact of all this and what we've seen with Cornwall Transit.
So Cornwall Transit was led the way and from what I've spoke to other local presidents across Canada with implementing from day one, everything from rear door entry, not collecting fares, equipping their drivers with PPE, etc. So I got to commend the city and the administration staff for protecting us. It was great. They are still doing it, obviously. So things that Cornwall Transit and the union have done combined to obviously help the public as well as the drivers and others behind the scenes is obviously PPE for the drivers. They've installed hand sanitizer dispensers at the entrance and the rear of the buses, which will remain in place. They've also set a 6-foot gap or 6-foot distance between the driver's compartment and the rear of the bus. Basically, nobody is allowed in that area except drivers to basically keep the distance. We are also been given multiple PPE, everything from gloves to masks to face shields, safety goggles or goggles. Recently, they've because of our handy transit paratransit system. As people know it as handy transit, we do a lot of door-to-door service. Some of the elderly like to hold their arms and stuff. So we have recently acquired plastic sleeving so we can put on so we can still accommodate that need. Other things that have been done have been equipment purchase to help sanitize the buses. They're done 2 to 3 times a week or as needed if the bus is definitely needed or we believe has been in contact. It's an electrostatic static sprayer. They spray the buses down with it, and it basically, within contact, will kill anything. The most recent thing that we're working on, and most people, if you've been on the bus, have seen them, is a driver compartment shield. They are Lexan glass. They are to basically protect the driver from, once we start front door boarding and starting to collect fares, they'll give us that separation between the drivers, very similar to what you would see at the grocery stores or at convenience stores, except it's a full shield with probably about a foot gap at the bottom for airflow.
Excellent. And all that to say, of course, that obviously increases cost of operations when, of course, revenue is either nothing or very little. So maybe just finally we can talk about how that all ties into as things reopen and more people are going to be needing the bus to get to work, to get to stores that are reopening. And although starting to collect fares will help, that basically proves the point of that money being necessary.
Exactly. So the $5 billion, like we've mentioned earlier, is to help with operational costs. Obviously, we've been full staff the entire way through this pandemic. So obviously, the cost of fares help offset salaries, benefits, etc. So the $5 billion would help, obviously, well, a portion of the $5 billion, I should say, because it gets split up across Canada, would help offset the cost that has been acquired or impacted to the city. Also, like you said, PPE costs, extra staff to help clean buses, etc. How is it going to impact with the opening of restaurants and other services in the city? We're already seeing it where we've seen an increase in ridership in the last week. About a 3%, 3 to 4% increase since the beginning of this pandemic. We've seen a large amount of people out and about, going to do some extra groceries, going to the bank, etc. One thing that we did do whenever we were, lack of better terms, knee deep in the pandemic, we were basically doing for essential travel only. So allowing people to travel for doctor's appointments, bank appointments, groceries, pharmacy, basically. But now that we've kind of opened up the gate a little bit more to let people go to shopping, etc., to go to Walmart, and that we're definitely seeing a large impact right now. And obviously the cleaning is going to be, if not anything, more important now than anything else. The disinfecting and etc., and protecting people all in all, because obviously we were limiting the capacity on the buses right now. Our small 30 footers are about 10 people max right now we're allowing, and on our full 40 footers we're allowing 12 to 13, as well as our paratransit for handy transit service. We're allowing a one-on-one contact with them. So obviously, as services open, more and more people are getting on, more and more contact is being done, and obviously harder to keep a 6-foot distancing in the bus. So more cleaning, more PPE, keep the service running. So yeah, the $5 billion across Canada would be a great asset to help out.
Absolutely. On that note, Scott, I want to thank you not only for joining me and educating our viewers a little bit about this request, but also about how our transit has been functioning. And thank you on behalf of the City of Cornwall to you and the entire staff of Cornwall Transit and the entire union for what you're doing to make sure that people are able to get from point A to point B in a safe and secure manner. So thank you very much for joining me once again, Scott.
Thank you for having me.